Self-awareness. Emotions. It's all emotions, right? Do you know you need to be here? Do you know you need to show up? Do you know you need to be disciplined? But we don't do it based on what? Emotion, right? The emotion is what we give ourselves to let ourselves off the hook to not be here to what it is. And so that's the overall part. And it's by far the emotions, the root cause on why we do or don't do the things that we know we should do that gets to what we want, right? Any impactful person is a master when it comes to their emotions. The actual definition of it in this scenario, right? Self-awareness is the ability to consciously recognize and understand your own emotions, thoughts, and behaviors, as well as their impact on yourself and others. To consciously recognize and understand your own emotions, thoughts, and behaviors, as well as their impact on yourself and others. It knows both your strengths, your weaknesses, but the best way I look at this, and somebody else said this, which is really, really helpful, it's the bottom line is you want to look at the self-awareness, it's the amount of truth that you're willing to accept about yourself in order to grow. That's the bottom line. Most people tend to not accept that truth, right? They tend to start at level 2 or level 3 and they don't get the growth they want. And so the ability to grow is going to come down to your ability to go deep enough in my self-awareness and what I'm willing to investigate and know about myself. And that comes things like my strengths, my weaknesses, my opportunities, my threats, right? They call it SWOT analysis. But what are my strengths? What are my weaknesses? I want to know both of what they are. In many cases, it's ego, which is justified by a story, right? And so they're too unwilling to look on the inside and take blame. That's why we talk about personal responsibility is the key of it. But that's the key thing. We have to understand that our thoughts become our behaviors. And so that's why it goes back to, we talked about alignment so important, where I can have these things in alignment between my values, right? In terms of what I want. I'm very clear on my goals and what I want, because that's going to allow me to have the ability and the desire to actually look inside to be able to try to figure out what's wrong. And so we have to figure out, hey, where do I get better at my self-awareness of going deeper in that? And so we have to ask ourselves this way: am I behaving in a way that's moving me closer to what I want or away from what I want? And this is why self-awareness is so important, right? It serves as a foundation for all personal growth, emotional intelligence, and effective decision-making. Just like you said, emotional intelligence and effective decision-making, right? Here's why it matters. Number one, a couple different things. Number one, it enhances emotional mastery. How do you think that is?
At least for me, there is always a conflict between what you should be and what you are.
Yeah.
And going through this process, I found it allows me to unstick and go more towards the person I want to be.
Yeah, because I can get up here every week and just yell and do whatever or teach, but it never changes until what? You got to make a decision change from the inside out, right? And everyone has different things need to change every time based on what it is. And so here's the key part. The emotional mastery part, the self-awareness allows you to recognize and regulate your emotions, preventing impulsive reactions and enable thoughtful responses in challenging situations. So what does that mean? Self-awareness allows you to recognize, right? Keyword here is to what? Recognize in real time is the first stage, where I can start to be aware of these things happening. Most people are reacting to stuff. They're blaming stuff, blaming people, blaming the leads, right? Well, after the third time, I'm going to say, hey, Miss Sally, we've missed each other 3 times. I've already booked you for tomorrow at 2 o'clock. My time slot is very important. Is there any reason or anything that come up where you wouldn't make it tomorrow, you're going to try to cancel? No. So you're giving me your word, Miss Sally, you're going to be there no matter what happens. Is that correct? Yes. Okay. But we have to be willing to do that. Or most people just tend to do what? Blame the client. And so that, again, comes back to self-awareness and what it is. But if I react and I just get angry at them, am I going to get what I want? No, right? That's where the key part comes in here. And the key words recognize and regulate are the 2 words. I recognize my emotion. I get triggered. I'm going to regulate that, meaning I'm not going to let that come out. And I prevent what? Impulsive reactions. So here's the key part, right? There's 3 main things that are foundational to all emotional mastery. Number 1, this is kind of a subset to number 1. Number 1, understanding who you are. What do you think that means? Understanding who you are.
Knowing how you operate.
I need to know who I am and how I show up. Am I somebody who gets emotionally triggered a lot? Am I somebody who reacts a lot? Am I somebody who expects things from people that a lot of times doesn't happen? And so this is something to understand. One of the first things I learned from one of my coaches, that was one of the best sayings in the world, is that people that live in expectations are people who are very unhappy. People that live in agreements are much happier, right? So you want to live in agreements, not expectations. So people that live in expectations are going to get let down most of the time. So with Miss Sally, I'm expecting her to show up, but she's no-showed me 3 times. What's going to happen to me most likely? I'm going to be upset. So I'm going to get into what? An agreement. Hey, Miss Sally, this is the 3rd time we miss each other. So tomorrow, are you going to be here? I need to know yes or no. I'm going to block out my time, but I can't reschedule and block out an hour or 2 hours for you not to show up again. So are you giving me your word you're going to be here at 2 o'clock tomorrow? Nothing's going to come up. You're still going to be here. Is that correct? That's what locks them in to I'm living in a place of agreement versus expectations. Most people are living in a place where they're not really high emotionally fit. They're unfit emotionally, and so you have to understand that from the first phase. Number 2, understand who you need to become. I listen to it every morning on the way to the gym. And that every morning is programming me in what? Who I need to be. And slowly and surely, out of that 50 things in that list, I'm knocking them out one by one by one by one. Right? And it's important to understand that. But for me to get clear on that and to get to that person, I have to be clear on where I want to be. Why? So I can see the contrast. And so this is how you get awareness. The foundation is what? Where I'm at. Right? And then the gap where I need to go and where I got to be to is who I want to be. And if I'm not clear on that, what am I going to do? I'm never going to get there. I'm just going to aimlessly bounce around like a pinball. And that's what most people in our circles do emotionally. They're up when the news is up, they're down when the news is down. People say things to them, they get triggered. And so that's important for us to understand. And the third piece of this is they behave accordingly. They behave accordingly. What does that mean?
You step into the person or the character you want to become.
Yes.
And you emulate those behaviors.
Yes.
Thought process.
Phase 3 is I take from the person I am at number 1, I move to number 2. Specifically when I'm under pressure. When things are happening, when I'm in the eye of the storm, I actually do the things I know I need to do, not the old things I used to do before. And so this is coming down to how to understand this. I'm just kind of setting the foundation. It's hard to teach a little bit in the beginning, but that's the foundational part of all mastery. In the next 3 to 4 months, 2026, you'll crush it. You'll unlock everything for you in 2026 because people that can recognize and regulate emotions and resist impulsive reactions, they're the ones that will be lethal in 2026. Why? Because every single time somebody lets me down, I don't react to that. I control, regulate my emotions. I'm able to make sure that I'm showing up no matter what happens in life, both inside work and outside work. I still show up and do what? The work every single day. The key is you have to have that mindset of having what? Commitment no matter what. The second part of what it does, it helps improve relationships. How is that possible, you think? So this is true both inside work and outside work. By understanding your own emotional patterns and behaviors, you communicate more effectively, empathize with others, and you build strong connections. And so that's the key part. Everybody been around somebody who can't regulate their emotions? What's it like? It's chaos, right? Are you able to have a deep connection with them? No, right? And so they're triggered by every little thing. They're angry all the time. They're constantly going back on their word. And you talk about that person, a lot of times have a high level of success. Can't do that. Why? They can't regulate their emotions. And it's a very, very important. I brought it to Ryan and Lucas this morning, but the reality is it's impossible to build a deep, healthy connection with somebody if this isn't present. And that's what? Understanding my emotional patterns, behaviors, and communicate more effectively. Really, that comes down to what? What's the word? That's the key word there. Empathy. I give empathy to people when it's not easy. Right? Number 3, it fosters better decision making. And what are we talking about right here? We're talking about self-awareness, right? And so self-awareness helps you align your choices, your values, your goals, and your long-term vision. And it ensures consistency and authenticity in your actions. Kind of Jeremy said earlier, I make my decisions based on standards instead of what? Emotions or feelings, which is another way to look at that, right? No matter what's going on feeling-wise, I still make my decisions based on what? What I want, what my goals are, which is kind of important to make sure I'm looking at, right? And here's the thing, all bad decisions usually come because you're drunk on emotion. Think about that. You say some bad things to somebody that you regret, right? Say some bad things to your spouse, say something bad to a client, you write this smart-ass message back to the agent, whatever it is, and most of the time it becomes being drunk on emotions. Most of us as humans typically come down to being drunk on emotion, which are things like anger, triggers, things like that, right? And so why does it matter? What's the most important part here is alignment, right? My goals, my principles, my actions are all in alignment, which is why we talked about that last week in our previous meeting. But here's the thing. When it comes to self-awareness, we need to understand what our values actually are. And so that's the key thing. Anybody ever discovered that the value that I'm living are not the values that I actually want to have? Anybody done that? Yeah, we all did, right? Lucas and I were talking about this morning. A lot of times I have this value of what I want, but I live it in a certain way, how I show up. And most of the time, the thing is that my actions are lining up with my words. Most of the time, people's words don't line up with their actions, which means they don't what? Get what they want. The values that you're doing and the values that you're saying must be in alignment overall. And the only difference when they're not in alignment comes down to what? Emotions. And so as we get better at this, you're going to start getting better at questioning yourself and understanding what your emotions are, that you give yourself the ability or the reason to let yourself off the hook. I have to figure out what's the story and the emotion I'm telling myself to let myself off the hook. And so that's what I asked Ryan. Hey, tell him, what in your mind has you believing that you've earned the right not to show up? Because there's no one here, maybe Jeremy, that has the ability most of the time, if he's not here to huddle, he's at an appointment that Joe booked. Right? Because he doesn't miss huddles in most cases, which is why you have the standard there. Because Jeremy lives by standard, not by emotion in most cases, right? And Ryan's, hey, I can't figure it out, man. You got to figure it out and hit him hard and say, look, what is the story and the justification that you've told yourself that you deserve not to be at a huddle when you have 0 pending deals? There's no reason at all that you should not be at every single meeting or every single huddle when you got 0 pending. Or you might as well just quit. Because you have no right not to be able to do it, right? And so that's a key part of being self-aware. And this is so much deeper than just the emotional part. People think it's emotion. But this is, why do I make decisions I do? Why do I not show up when I know I need to show up? And this is helping you learn and really deconstruct yourself so I can make better decisions going forward. This is that's a great example because here's the crazy. Is it a fact that if I write 15 tickets, I'm going to have a heart attack? No, right? But that's a story. Right. That's an emotion that we tie into it. And so the emotion is I don't have a heart attack, so I don't write the 15 tickets. And this is the same exact thing that we do on a Wednesday, Thursday, Friday in terms of workplace environment and how we show up. These are all the things that we do. You have to figure out, okay, what am I doing to let myself off the hook? And what's the story I've told myself that I actually deserve it? It makes a big difference. And so the better I get at this, the more growth I have and the more money I make. Does this make sense to you guys?
I actually was talking about this last week and I actually wrote it down. People actually judge themselves by their intentions and not by their actions.
Yeah.
When in actuality, it should be the opposite. They should judge other people by their intentions and judge themselves by their own actions. So that's the only thing that you can hold accountable in that regard.
Yeah.
And I think that once you do that paradigm shift, you'll see better results.
Yeah. And one of the things that I taught you briefly last week, and what did you tell me?
The question, why are they showing up to begin with? Because if you're not here, right, then there's no accountability. They need to be accountable to themselves.
Right. And so this is the key part. And this is just a great example. I want you guys to investigate and look internally. Okay, what is the story I tell myself? And so how do you link someone not being here to me not being here? Because that me not being here has nothing to do with you being here. Does that make sense? And for me, I'm here regardless of no matter who's here. It just is what it is, right? If I'm in town. But it's important that you live by what? The standard, not the emotion. Because if I'm not here when so-and-so is not here, am I living by emotion or standard? Emotion. Because it's tied to somebody else. If you do 9-day goals and it's tied to somebody else, you're screwed. You have to always have it to you and you only, and it has to be your and your standard. And so that's why this emotional self-awareness is so important that I got to make sure I'm getting to that point. The same thing with people triggers. Somebody does something trigger you and you're triggered about it. You got to make sure that that's your trigger on you, right? You got to get to where the emotion and what the emotion and what it leads to. And so one of the examples is that people get nervous. So most people get nervous, right? They link nervousness to inadequacy, right? Where I get nervous because I think I'm not good enough. But if you ask a pro golfer, right, is in a situation with millions of dollars, the last couple of holes, they're under pressure. They have thousands and potentially millions of people watching them if it's on TV. And they hit the thing and they interview the golfer. But at the end they say, hey, how'd you hit that shot? He said, man, that's the most nervous I've ever been my whole life. But what did he do? He sank it because he didn't allow nervousness to affect the outcome. Most people tend to let nervousness affect the outcome, but he didn't link the emotion to that. He affected nervousness to power to make sure you execute at a high level. And this is where you start getting really good because I pick the emotion that does what? That serves me in the moment. And so he got to a point where he's so good at it, he had the nervousness, and so he channeled the nervousness into power, which allowed him to sink the putt and win the thing. Does it make sense? Well, the thing is, like Joe says, it's like, how do I deal with it? And as you get better, and you get better emotional mastery, I turn to master my emotions, and so now I channel the energy I want when I have. And so everybody gets nervous at every single level. Michael Jordan got nervous before games, right? He talks about that in a lot of stuff, but the reality is they just come out and execute. And so it's how I master those emotions so I get what I want in the outcome. Makes sense? If I get nervous about making dials, and I associate the fear with that, and inadequacy, worry about judgment of people on the outside, I tend to do what? Not make the dials. But if I have the nervousness about dials, and I still do it anyways, and I have this energy about serving people, I'm going to serve people and make more dials and be successful. It just is what it is, right? That's a great example of how we want to understand at a deeper level, but we all have it's called a scotoma, right? Where you can't see the issue. You have certain blind spots, and most of us have these blind spots in terms of what we're missing, which is why I want to investigate. I'll give you guys some tools today on how to do that. Number 4, it helps identify strengths and weaknesses. So it helps identify strengths and weaknesses. And so acknowledging an area that I need to improve on and leveraging my strength empowers personal and professional development. And so that's the key part, right? Number 5, it boosts leadership and influence. Leaders with high self-awareness inspire trust and confidence and create environments where people thrive, right? And that could be your client, be yourself with us. And so here's a great example. A weak leader can only influence people like themselves. What do you think that means? People try to recruit them just to be like themselves, right? I want to really associate and connect with people just like me. We're very similar, but it's hard for me to lead other people who are different because I don't have this emotional regulation to really go in and connect with them. And so here's an interesting way to look at level 1 leadership is they can influence someone like themselves. So put level 1 leadership, influence people like them. Number 2, they can influence people like them and people that are indifferent. What does that mean, you think? They're just pretty laid back. Level 3, you can influence people like you. It's level 3 leadership. And people not like you one-on-one. So that's like a pretty good salesperson, right? I can influence people like me, but I can also do what? Slow down, change, and adapt to be able to sell people who are not like me, and I meet them where they're at. I bring them into my world, and I'm able to move them forward, right? Which is important. Level 4 leadership is I can influence an audience. What does that mean, you think? Yeah, they can influence a larger group, right? 5, 10, 15, 20 people, they can influence those type of people in a larger thing, like a situation like this, right? Number 5, level 5 leadership is they can influence community, right? Large influencers in terms of how they do things. They connect with people, and typically people that have large followings tend to have a high emotional IQ because they can do what? Connect to more people on a larger scale. Some learn that as a skill set, but those are kind of the 5 main levels. They can influence communities and large groups. And so here's the deal. I want you guys to also write this down. This is important to understand. Why it's important to know your weakness. Why do you think it's important to know your weakness in terms of influence? From a connection standpoint, people love people who own their weaknesses. The more you own the flaws that you have, the more people are able to connect with you. If you come in as Mr. and Mrs. Perfect, everyone, what happens? You trigger people or they think it's fake. I can talk about challenges I've been through and things I've overcome and my childhood or certain things, right? Which I tie that the right way into what made me who I am today, but you got to be very careful about that. But here's the deal. Bottom line is you want to get good to understand your weaknesses. And people love other people who own their weaknesses and can talk about it. Not in a negative way, but in a way that you've overcome what they were in that part. And number 6, reduces stress and conflict. I'll say understanding your triggers and responses minimizes misunderstandings and helps you navigate conflicts with clarity and calmness. Instead of reacting, I just respond, and a lot of times I don't react with any emotion, I react to whatever the outcome I want is. And when you surround yourself with people who take responsibilities for their thoughts, their feelings, their emotions, people feel safer. People aren't triggered all the time, they're not angry, they're not lashing out at you about stuff. You're able to have much deeper conversations, deeper connections, because people are able to understand and regulate their emotions at a deeper level. Your clients want to be around you because why? They feel like they can talk to you about more things because now you're regulating your emotions, your responses to help get out what you need by asking better questions, and that helps them feel better in how they share with you, right? And then number 7, it drives personal accountability. So self-aware individuals take responsibility for their actions, their outcomes, and they foster growth and resilience. Blind spots. Blind spots. You're driving a business, driving a real estate business, your blind spots. And those are things that we justify emotionally. We've done for so long and so many times that we just let ourselves off the hook. How do we start working on this? How do we get deeper and put this into action? There's 3 main dimensions of self-awareness we talk about. So number 1, internal. I'll put 3 dimensions here. So internal self-awareness, the ability to understand your own inner world, your thoughts, your emotions, your values, your motivations. It requires you recognizing how your internal state influences your behavior and decisions. Make sense? I'm aware. I react certain ways. I get triggered about certain things. It allows me to remember something, be aware. And so here's the thing. I want to learn to control. The key word here is inner state. What's that mean, you think? Inner state. My state of being, right? It's how I'm emotionally. It's how I feel. It's my internal energy. A lot of times people can hide it pretty well. They think on the inside, but the person across from you can read it very, very easily. You can watch them get triggered. As you learn this more, you can watch people get triggered. They, on the outside, are saying the right things, but you can, Jerry mentioned, most of that communication, 93%, is how they show up energetically. You can see their trigger very easily and what that is. And so here's the thing. Your inner state is predicated on 3 things. Number 1, the thing you focus on. So, number 1, the thing I focus on. What you focus on, you feel. What you focus on, you feel. So do I focus on the problem or I focus on the solution? There's 2 different things behind that. You focus on the problem, how many problems I got. What's my emotions going to be like? Problematic, right? I focus on the solution. My emotion will be much more solution focused in terms of how I do things. That's pretty cool. Your empathy, understand those issues and how they operate. Make sense, you guys? It's simple. You have to understand what I focus on, good or bad in that scenario. It all comes down to what I focus on. That drives my inner state. If I focus on the thing that's negative, I'm going to have negative emotion behind it. Focus on the thing that's good. Now, it doesn't mean I fool myself all the time and I live in reality, but there's always typically two main emotions or things you can choose to focus on. That's number one. Second thing, number two, the language patterns you use. What do you think that means?
Positive or negative speaking, maybe?
And there's two things about this. Number one, self-talk. That's a key part in terms of how I show up and how I talk about myself. And the second one is the language you speak outwardly. Which one's the most dangerous thing? Self-talk all day long. But here's the deal. And this is why it's important. Like, who wants to be around somebody who talks about negative all the time? Who likes to be around complainers? Nobody. That doesn't matter. That doesn't bring anything. Why? Because we want to recruit people to our feeling, to our emotion. Goes back to what I talked about before. People want to recruit them to their feeling so they feel justified in what they're doing and what they're feeling. And then ultimately, it doesn't serve anybody, not the other person or yourself. That's why personal responsibility is so big. Does that make sense, you guys? It ties together in a big way. The second thing, right, is awareness of my self-talk in terms of how I do it. Because the self-talk I have drives my emotions. But over time, I've learned what? Emotional mastery. I understand, like, look, man, do I want to come home and be triggered about some dumb stuff? I don't want to have a good evening in terms of what I do. And that wasn't even a question last night. It was just natural. Hey, you're pretty amazing to do both kids all day. That's pretty crazy. I bet you're under a lot of stress. Let's go do something, right? That was something that's important to do there. And number three, this is an important one too. Hold on, number two, I forgot about this. Do you speak optimistically or are you a pessimist? And you got to look back at this, right? Do I speak optimistic in terms of how I speak my language, or am I a pessimist? And you got to be aware of this. You got to start doing what? Taking inventory. If you grow up in a household that spoke negative, what happens to you most of the time? You speak negative. Certain cultures do that. Italians, right? My wife's family's Italian. They just blah, 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 all kind of talking all the time. Right? Is it true? Is it true or not? But you have to understand, I have to learn, if that's the way I was brought up, I have to make sure I can regulate that in a larger setting with more people that I can bring in who I want to influence at a high level. Does that make sense? And so that's something that's important to look at what it is. So again, ask myself, do I speak optimistically or am I a pessimist? Am I going to attract a lot of people around me? No one wants to be around a pessimist. And if I do attract somebody, what are they going to be? A pessimist, a complainer, because basically that misery loves company, and so we're going to be complaining each other is going to make your life miserable. And so you got to lead from the front being what? Optimistic in how you show up and how you talk. And that no negativity rule in your entire life makes a big difference. Number three, this is important. How you move your body. What does that mean, you think?
Body language.
Yes. How does that work, you think? Yes. If you look around the room, watch people, typically top producers, what do they tend to do? They sit up straight, they're dialed in, they're focused, they have posture in terms of what they do. There's that an energy that's going to attract people in terms of that, and so that drives what? My inner state. Does this make sense? And so how do I fix that? You got to correct it, right? You just correct your body posture, how you show up. And so here's the thing, right? People that are slunched over, if you watch in the grocery store, somebody who's just slunched over, going really slow, are they typically going to be really happy? No, people that are happy have what? Pep in their step, energy. They show up there looking around, they're acknowledging people. That's just a natural skill you learn that enables you to have emotional mastery in how you show up and you manage your internal state. Make sense? Tony Robbins teaches us a lot. It's super important to look at overall with that. And so those are top three things of number one. Number two, external self-awareness. What does that mean?
How you react to the outside.
Yes. And this is also an important part, and I've struggled with this before too, is this is also how people perceive you, right? It involves understanding how others perceive you overall. It means being aware of the impression you give and also how you react to other people, your actions and how they impact those around you, whether the perception aligns with your intentions. And it's important, right? Am I showing up in these three things? What's my inner state look like typically when you see it? What do you see me get triggered on? You want to ask people that are in a place that you want to be. Ask people that have energy that you want to have, right? I don't want to just ask regular people who aren't in a place I want to be because they may give me what? Bad feedback. You can, in many cases, ask your spouse. Your spouse will probably tell you pretty spot on how you show up, right? You just got to be aware, though, sometimes they can have a bias sometimes based on how they're brought up, too, which is important there as well. And number three, emotional blind spots. It's the third dimension. Emotional blind spots. What does that mean, you think?
Things you're not aware of.
And that would be things like what? Yeah, these are areas where you lack awareness about your own emotions, behaviors, often leading to unintended consequences. For example, you may not realize that you interrupt others during conversations. That hinders communication, right? Identify and addressing these blind spots for crucial growth, right? It's important. Growth is all about awareness. But here's the thing. It only comes when you put awareness where awareness is not ever gone. So that's, I think Chris's takeaway is talking about that from a couple weeks ago. Most people just put awareness where they're aware. You have to be willing to take awareness and put it where? Where you're not aware. And so how do I do that? Record yourself. Watch the video. Listen to the video. How you show up energetically, both physically and also audibly. Like I said, the easiest way is to record an audio on your phone. What my old coach used to do all the time, make me do a video in the corner and record my presentation. That changed, was one of the biggest game-changing things I've ever done. I can't control other people's actions or responses, but I can control how I show up, how many days I show up, how many phone calls I make, how good I am on the phone, how much training I do with Grant Cardone. And so you have to be willing to make sure you focus on that overall. Number 2, focus on the things that you have, not the things you don't have. It's important. So what do you think that means? Scratching away, right? Making sure I'm focused on what I do have that's good, what I have skill set wise. And making sure I'm keeping in the present moment away, which I'll talk to. Number 3. Number 3 is focus on the present moment right now. Emotionally fit people focus on right now, not the past, not the future. Emotionally fit people love feedback. How do you, number 1, you guys get really good at recognizing, hey, I'm triggered right now. How do you know you feel triggered? You feel increased heart rate, you feel tension, you feel the emotional, you can feel your adrenaline start pumping, right? And so you want to recognize the trigger. It's important because most times your whole life you just reacted and unleashed friggin' hell on people, right? In most cases. So number 2, you must pause. Number 1, recognize. Number 2, pause. Number 3, reframe the situation or the story. It's important. I do this in my stack every morning. Most of the time, the story I'm telling myself is not true. It's emotional. And that's why they ask, hey, what are the facts about the situation, regardless of any emotion? And then ask me his next question, which is, what do you truly want? You know, which is important to do there. And so, number 1, recognize, right? When you're triggered, you want to feel it. And the first thing you want to do is you want to get where you pause. Before reacting, use techniques like deep breathing, pause for a second, walk around. Just do not send the message. One of the guys, this Dustin Runyon guy, super sharp, got a lot of stuff from him between this and Warrior. He waits to the next day and sends it. And guess how many times he typically sends it? Never. Almost never, right? Because the emotional piece is not driving the real outcome that you want. And so it's important that you don't have a long enough pause to do that. Reframe the situation, right? You want to shift from reactive thoughts to constructive perspective. Meaning, how do I shift from being reactive to get what I want? How do I get what I want out of this guy or lady, right? Mindfulness practice, which are things like journaling. That's important, right? I want to write this down at the end of every day. What did I feel today? And what caused those feelings? What I feel today and what caused those feelings? And last thing I was trying to get to, this is important, and I got to run, is emotional mapping. What do you think that is? Emotional mapping. So you connect your physical sensations, your thoughts and emotions to the source. So for example, if I have a tight chest, my adrenaline starts pumping, right? That comes from stress. And then ultimately, the stress equals something. Stress equals fear of failure, feeling of inadequacy, right? You want to figure out, okay, what's the emotion I'm feeling? I want to map that to what? My source. And that typically is what? Internal belief or fear or whatever it is in that scenario. So I want to help link the bodily cues to emotional states. It leads to faster recognition and management of that emotion. Does that make sense? And here's the other thing you guys want to do. Actively seek feedback from trusted peers or colleagues who can help you uncover blind spots. And here's the thing. You want people who are in a situation where you want to be. Like, I don't take advice from anybody in life who is not in a position I want to be. I'll take some feedback, but it doesn't mean I listen to it. Make sense? Because if I take free feedback from people who aren't where I want to be in life, I'm going to end up like them. And one of the best quotes I've ever gotten is that free feedback is really worth what you pay for it in many cases, unless they're a mentor or someone that you look up to, want to be there. Last thing here. You want to envision your highest self. Constantly, I got 1K Blake, like what your best version is, we need to get that done for you. And that's your avatar of who you want to be so you can align with that person, how they show up and what they do. And what would that person I want to become do in this situation? And the simple question you ask yourself every single day, what am I feeling right now? Why am I feeling this way? And how does this emotion serve or hinder my goals? How does this emotion serve or hinder my goals?